Investment Guide. It's Wednesday, which means it's your date with us when we step a little back and take a look at the larger picture when it comes to the world of investing. I'm Surabhi Upadhyay, and with me is Anuj Singhal. Anuj back, of course, from his holiday. And what interesting times, Anuj. Today we'll be speaking with someone who is very well regarded in this market because he's not just an investor, he's someone who's into the world of academics. He teaches a lot as well. And he's seen so many market cycles, right? And at this all-time high, perhaps it's good to go in and take that lesson.
Well, yes, and Surabhi, this is the function of the market, right? You discuss multi-baggers when the market is in a bull market. Though the time to actually invest in those multi-baggers actually happens in the bear market. For example, March, April perhaps was the time. But of course, we will discuss all of that as we move along. So let's start CNBC TV 18 Investment Guide. Okay, well, our guest today is Kuntal Shah, one of the young Turks of Dalal Street, founding partner at Oaklane Capital Management. Thanks a lot, Kuntal. It's always good to talk to you both on air and off air. The big question right now, as I just said, right now is a bit of a euphoria. So everyone wants to know the multi-baggers, right? But the market is always risky at these times. So how does one keep balance? What would be your advice?
So Anuj and Surabhi, thanks for having me over. The pleasure is all mine. There are good times and there are bad times, and what an interesting year we had. So as Lenin had said, that there are some decades where nothing happens, and then there are some weeks where decades happen. And what a year this has been, that we had a recession and we had a boom. We had a problem of demand and then now supply constraints coming in. People were getting laid off and now people are getting jobs back. It's been a whole topsy-turvy year, and in such a year, market being a reflexive and complex adaptive system, market has also been through the ups and downs. And I think so the biggest challenging factor with this cycle has been the speed and the velocity with which the mood of the market and the sentiment has changed dramatically in response to the increased monetary supply and the lowering of interest rates, in particular as far as financial markets are concerned. I don't think so the verdict is out on the business cycle yet, because business tend to take time to adjust to the new reality and supply chains are getting adjusted. I was just talking to another large company. They are having supply chain issues with the semiconductors, so on and so forth. So I think so we will muddle through. This is a once in a century event, in the sense the proverb that hindsight is 20/20 has been proven right. Now to come to how do you deal with it is, I think so the importance of history in financial market is highly underrated. Let me give you a more nuanced example. Businesses are run by people. They serve goods and services to customers who are people. They are regulated by people. They are managed by people. The asset prices in the market are also set by the people. So ultimately, human beings are at the center of everything, and the human psychology, small changes in human psychology tends to produce exaggerated and amplified changes in the asset prices, and this time has not been any different. So if you are studying history, you will realize that world has braved through many man-made crises, namely demonetization and inflations and currency depreciations and wars and so on and so forth, as well as naturally occurring things like earthquakes and famines and so on and so forth. I think so this too shall pass, and this is a statement you can afford to make only if you have patience and long-term capital available to you. Absent the two, you are bound to be hyperactive and reacting to the market rather than trying to benefit from the volatility. In fact, if you are a long-term investor, you would pray for a constant volatility to give you opportunity to buy the businesses you like and understand on and off at valuation which you are comfortable, and gives you opportunity to take advantage of the people who are forced sellers during such periods of dislocation. So I think so this time has not been any different in any circumspect. We have gone through pandemics in the past, which has created a lot of havoc in the businesses. This time is no different.
Okay, this time is no different. Kuntal, while it's good to look at history, one also needs to keep the present context in mind as well, right? Because at the end of every crisis, perhaps, the shape and form of the winners could be different. Disruption is also a reality. So the dot-com, then the global financial crisis, and then this biggest pandemic in 100 years. What are the similarities and differences? And more importantly, when you look at the present landscape, when you look all around, you look at policy, you look at the macros, is there anything that worries you? What comes to mind when you look at the current market at all-time highs in the present environment?
So, Surabhi, let me get this straight. I am a bottom-up stock picker, but I am very top-down, and in these circumstances, there is enough to worry about. Also, let me be very clear that in businesses, the prices are set by the smartest guy who has got the most efficient production cost and is rational about it. But only in the stock market, you have the dumbest guy setting the price based on his perceived opportunity cost and the ability to lose money or chase momentum. Having said that, the clear message with the current episode has thrown out is that you got to have your framework and your assessment of the businesses in ready so that you can capitalize on the periods of dislocation like this. Because if you see what has happened is over the periods of century, the number of episodes of booms and bust have started becoming more frequent. Earlier in last 800 documented history of financial markets, the periods of booms and busts used to last for a long period of time and were not as frequent. But due to the intervention of central bankers and the government and the very aggressive monetary response which they bring in response to the crisis, I think so what is happening is the frequency is getting higher and higher, the duration is getting lower and lower, but amplitude of the upside and the downside is also getting magnified. Okay. So this is the context in which the markets are functioning. As far as we come to India and the global worldwide, you see that interest rates are almost touching negative in most of the developed world, and the quantum of money which is related to GDP is almost all-time high. So you are seeing that manifest in higher asset prices like home prices, bitcoins, the bond prices and the elevated equity prices. So I think so the three things which worry me the most from global context is the interest rate cycle, the monetary base, and from Indian stock market perspective, I'm worried about three things from the Indian government side, specifically the response to the fiscal deficit, which is straining the government finances, the policies to stimulate the government.
Okay, got it. So Kuntal,
broadly sums up the.
Okay, in terms of investment style, what kind of style works for you? Growth, value. This year it's been a lot about momentum investing as well. What would be your own investment philosophy, and within that, how do you see existing valuations?
Anuj, I think so. This all classifications are basically from marketing perspective to categorize one strategy or a fund manager in a particular bracket. I don't think so. The real life work this ways. Growth is an integral part of value. Valuations are integral part of value. Everything is umbilically connected to the hip, and I think so. This kind of nuance devices is not something which I worry about, because I have to react to the opportunity set which come to me, and that has no definition. Every investment style goes out of the favor or comes back into the favor at any point of time. So I think that the only mantra is to figure out which are the investable opportunities where risk reward and asymmetric payoff possibilities are on your side.
Okay, take that point, Kuntal. So what we'll do, we'll take a break, and when we come back, we will talk about
concentrate his time, because if one doesn't concentrate his thoughts, time and efforts, so since the sheer number of opportunities available in the market are so large, one would suffer from decision fatigue, which will lead to bad decision making. So first, you got to have a framework which makes the opportunity set you examine and think about it on a day-to-day basis very small enough, so that it has enough potential on the upside, but also narrow enough to allow you to get to know the upside and the downside scenario quite well. So typically the process starts, for me at least, which works, is that I try to take certain companies of certain scale and certain size and try to eliminate what I call fragility within the companies which I look at. Now, what are the sources of the fragility? So if you look at it, any company which is highly leveraged doesn't have margin of error or safety on that side. Secondly, the company where incentives of the management are misaligned with the incentives of the minority shareholder would have differential purpose, and that is amply borne out in the way the PSUs are being governed. But having said that, once in the 2 decades there always come a time then where we deliver a way on upside on the basis of the deep discount at which they are available at, and this could be one of the time as well. So one start like peeling off all the sources of fragility. Any management which is engaging in a win-lose situation would eventually not give you a compounded return over a long period of time, and let me be more nuanced about that. First, to win in the stock market, the management has to win with the customer market. Management has to also win the talent market. So the toxic culture are something which needs to be avoided. So there is a litany of checklist with you filter down and arrive at opportunity set which gives you companies which are likely to give you a good favorable chance of a asymmetric payoff. Now, it's very well known that there are only few ways companies can create value for the shareholders. One classic way is to increase the free cash flow generation, which can be done by either lowering the interest cost, tax burden, increasing profit margin or asset turn, or funding the asset cheaply. This DuPont formula is well known to almost all investors, but there are many soft intangibles side about the art side of the finding the right investment processes which are not screenable. For example, management culture is not one such thing. The ability of management to compete and respond to the changing customer preferences and technological innovation is something which you have to deeply think about. So it's a twin tech process analysis where after having a meaningfully decent size of companies, you look at 3 aspects of the businesses: the business in itself, the management which is driving the business, and most importantly your expectation and your reaction to the range of outcomes which are probabilistic in nature. Let's deep dive in each of them. From business perspective, obviously you are looking at businesses which are competitively advantaged, especially in the times of dislocation, that they tend to get market share, and obviously they are riding on the back of a large mega trend or a tailwind which enables to grow their top line at faster than the nominal GDP growth. If not, and yet they are cheap, then probably many of them will qualify in value traps, which is something you would want to avoid for time value of money and the compounding thereon. So you analyze the business from various vantage point of that of a customer, that of a regulator, that of a vendor, that of a competitor, and you try to find out what are the few those parameters which keep company in a very advantageous position. You would want to typically you would come across this kind of companies in sectors which don't have too much of capital intensity, are having a very slow or negative working capital, have very high gross margins or very high asset turnovers, and are typically consolidating in nature, where supply is probably shrinking faster than the demand. From the management view side, you want to partner with a management which is energetic, intelligent, and ethically aligned to your value systems. You would want to have a management which is capable of reinventing and pivoting to the new changes which are likely to occur. You want to have a management which is good capital allocator, because that's the single most decision which they can in control, and hence management which tend to do buybacks and reduce the number of outstanding share using cash flows which are real tend to create a lot of wealth. Also, the management which is not driven by hubris and is not so obsessively focused on the market but is focused on the customer and has a day one mentality are likely to win. The most difficult part, however, is to control yourself and your own emotion. They say that everything compounding works in long term, right? But in long term we are all dead, and long term is series of short term which you have to navigate, and hence the most difficult part for an investor is every investor has had a lot of multi-baggers in their portfolio, but the question is what was the capital they allocated to it, and how much time did they held for.
Got
the
that.
duration of the holding period is the biggest Achilles heel of investors.
Got that. Holding period is important. Now, Kuntal, you referred to history as something which perhaps doesn't get as much importance as it should. So let's talk about your historical lessons. What are the kind of challenges you have faced and the kind of mistakes you have made? If you could give us some examples, and what were the learnings from them?
So, Anuj, I've learned at the School of Hard Knocks, and experience has taught me many things, but she has also sent very terrific bills to me. When I sit back and analyze the kind of mistakes which have constantly been reoccurring, I think so one big mistake which doesn't show up in my balance sheet is the acts of omission, which is regarding to a lot of businesses whom I understood very well, but I didn't have the courage to load it up, or I waited for a favorable price, and how I have overcome that is more meaningful. So what I do now is, whenever I have 70 to 80% comfort with the investment proposition, I at least initiate a small position, and I know it's a mental accounting, but this enables me to keep track of the company and load it up as my cognizance of the company and the business prospects unfold in time. I think so this process of averaging up has really helped me to overcome that mistake of getting anchored to a stock price and not acting on it thorough. Second big mistake which is recurring is premature selling. I have very high opportunity costs because we don't generate any additional capital. So what used to happen is, when the stock used to become slightly expensive, I used to rush to sell to buy something new without realizing the fact that as the company delivers and the company changes its orbit in terms of scale and profitability and size, investors with much more lower threshold of acceptable returns come to buy it and make the stock liquid. The company gets included in indices, in F&O, and all those technical things come over, and they stay expensive for a long period of time. And how do I have calibrated this learning? There is a narrow zone of buy zone for me, which I follow by first getting a small position and then loading it up. But there is a very wide range of hold zone now where I just don't do anything and try to just keep on analyzing my investment hypothesis with a clear proviso that your ideas are meant to be stress tested as new information comes in. They are not meant to be cherished. So you constantly seek out disconfirming evidence about the hypothesis which could render the original hypothesis wrong. This, I think so, is a constant exercise and helps you to stay anchored. And two things which really help me is maintaining a decision journal and doing a pre-mortem rather than post-mortem, that what could kill this business or what could go wrong to make my situation as an investor unviable. So these are the two mistakes which I personally have gone through multiple times over. However, there's a lot of learning from documented history. Both greed, fear, and stupidities of human investors has been well documented.
Oh yes, absolutely. Human emotions, I guess, is what it boils down to in the end, right? Before we go, we do have to wind up now. Just about a minute left on the show, Kuntal. Everybody wants to know your next big idea, and I know you can't take any names out here, but at least tell us what excites you in the market right now. Some themes, anything that you might be studying or analyzing at present.
So I think so in financial sector, the market share is moving towards the efficient with low cost of capital and distribution in place and technology in place. There are 5-6 names which will continue to do well because there is a long runway of market share to gain. I think so supply side is consolidated also dramatically in one sector, which I will leave a quiz with you, that it's a sector which is almost 6% of India's GDP, but even under less than 1% of India's market cap, and supports actually 260 industries, and government has laid out huge amount of incentive to this. You are right, I'm referring to housing and construction and real estate. I think so you will have some clear emerging winners out there. Pharma, IT and certain materials where supply constraints remain, and India has natural advantage in terms of manufacturing capability and know-how, I think so also would turn to continue to do well given the situation.
All right, Kuntal, we will leave it there today. Thanks a lot for joining us. Good talking to you. And the thing which stood out with me, Surabhi, is the importance of history, in stock markets. And the reason for that is very simple. Stock market is about greed and fear, and greed and fear is something which hasn't changed for last 100 years, will not change in the next 100 years, and that's why history plays a very important lesson in what markets do.
Well, that's the big takeaway from this week's investment guide. Kuntal, thanks very much for joining in. We have to take your leave as well. We'll bring you more interesting themes in the coming weeks. Thank you for watching.